Live from the Real Asset Queen studios in Kalispell, Montana, this is the Real Asset Queen Live, the one and only show about connecting people, process, and money. Each week, you'll hear mind-blowing interviews from top industry thought leaders, as well as actionable tips and strategies that you can implement in your finances, business, or investing life. Please welcome your host, a former healthcare executive turned entrepreneur, investor, and efficiency expert, Michelle Kimbrough.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Real Asset Queen Live. We are episode 23, and tonight we have a very special guest in the house, Dr. Paul Zak, and we're going to be talking about the science of business. And I think more affectionately, Paul is known as Dr. Oxytocin. He's done a lot of research around that. Some housekeeping disclaimers. We are not financial advisors, so please, anything that you hear on our show, take back to your CPA, tax accountant, or tax attorney to make sure it fits your particular situation. I will be hosting a live Q&A at the end of our conversation with Paul, so please put in those questions in the chat box that are keeping you up at night. Paul and I had a lovely discussion before we jumped on, trying to figure out what wires entrepreneurs and helps us make decisions. So we're going to dig into that. So Paul, I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself. You have an amazing background and experience. And one of the things that I always like to ask my guests, and I asked you last time, is tell us a fun fact about Paul.
There's no fun facts. I'm so boring. So I don't know what I told you last time. I sort of been a backdoor member of the Screen Actors Guild. So that's a weird thing. There's a long story there that we'll save for some other day over beers. But yeah, I'm a professor at Claremont Graduate University in Southern California, 4-time startup guy, professional nerd, kind of math and neuroscience guy, and run a big behavioral neuroscience lab. And some of the stuff we've done in the lab, I put more effort in and brought them to the public. So my current company, Immersion Neuroscience, has democratized neuroscience, created a neuroscience platform that anybody can use to measure what the brain loves in real time, any place people are doing interesting things.
And you had a little experiment that you did in New Guinea. Could you tell us briefly about that? Because the story is amazing, I thought.
So why would you say little, Michelle? This was so hard. Yeah, so when we started working on the neuroscience of high performance teams, I really got concerned that the kind of experiments we were running in my laboratory and for-profit and nonprofits in North America wouldn't generalize. And so I had the opportunity to go with a Japanese film crew to study an indigenous tribe in Papua New Guinea and use the same technologies. These guys, there's no running water, no electricity, no bathrooms. I was embedded in them for a week, and we actually measured blood, took blood draws to measure the kind of physiologic responses that they have when they coordinate to do group work. And it's the same responses we've seen in the rest of the world. So it looks like these mechanisms generalize. Since then, we've developed technologies that are my new company that don't involve blood draws, can measure from Apple Watches and fitness sensors like people wear every day, measure what the brain values second by second.
Yeah, that story is amazing. And Paul is also the author of several books. One is The Trust Factor. Get that because it really digs into the dynamics of organizations and how to encourage high performing teams. And Paul, what is your new book that you just came out with?
New book just came out called Immersion: The Science of the Extraordinary and the Source of Happiness. So like in business and in life, Michelle, you never want to fight fair. So the unfair fight here is that I have more brain observations than any neuroscientist. We've got 50,000 brain observations because we built a platform, and people, hundreds of people every day get their brains measured and they get access to that data. So really insights how to create great advertising, amazing customer experiences, super memorable training and education, uh, and ultimately about creating happiness in the world. And that's what people will pay for. We live in the experience economy. So how do I create great experiences? And asking people doesn't work. We don't know a great experience, but our brains know.
Yeah, that's great. 50,000 observations, that is a significant database to pull that from.
Yeah.
So, talk to us a little bit about what neuroeconomics is. When I first heard that term, I'm a nerd too, as you know, so I looked up everything possible, and your Trust Factor book, did give a good synopsis of it. But talk to us a little bit about what that is, because I really think you spearheaded that, didn't you?
Yeah, I guess I was one of the people who helped start these interdisciplinary fields: neuroeconomics, neuromarketing, neuromanagement. I think a lot of what was happening in those fields was applying insights from cognitive psychology or behavioral science in general to general situations, but not specific situations. And so I think ultimately economics is about decision making. So if we are interested in why people do what they do, having them make a decision is a really interesting way. And then asking them why they made that decision get you nowhere. So you've really got to measure brain activity. With many other folks, help develop technologies that measure brain activity while people made decisions individually, in teams, at work, at play. And so it's that decision that to me is the key factor there. And I'm a tool guy, so I help develop a bunch of tools, as I kind of mentioned, to allow us to, in particular, characterize what the brain's doing during these different decision points and really understand them. And so there's a real pushback from my perspective on the behavioral economics. And I know all those people, Dan Ariely and others, are all good friends and collaborators. But I think the problem with behavioral economics is this word irrational.
Mm.
So if I pay you $1 to basically solve some hard math problem and you can't do it, you're irrational. I think a much more scientifically valid and humble question is to ask, why does someone's brain solve this particular problem in a way I think that should be solved and other people don't? What are the factors that generate neural diversity? And that diversity again can be captured in that decision point. And so I think that's really the kind of quest we've been on, is to, because I'm a Martian, Michelle, you know me, to really understand what the humans are doing, because they can't tell me by measuring brain activity.
Yeah, that's true. But that translates into business. And, I'm a syndicator, so I deal with a lot of investors now. And I think it could parlay into that world, or any business, decision that you have with a customer or even an employee. What makes them do that decision or proceed with that particular thing at that point in time when somebody else may not. So, how does all of this translate into business today, and how can we, lean on that to make better decisions?
Yeah, I think there's two levels. One is the general level, which is, there are general principles that report in the book that allow us to use the neuroscience measurements that we've accumulated to create better customer experiences, to be better presenters. We showed that this neurologic state I've called immersion, if you can increase it by 10% during a TED Talk, you get 176,000 more online views. So the effect sizes are big, right? And so there's some general ways that we found you can do that by just measuring a ton of these. And the second is then a call for measurement. So I live outside Los Angeles. For the last 30 years, 80% of Hollywood movies have lost money.
Mm.
It's just shocking to me. How have we not gotten better at understanding a good piece of content versus a bad piece of content, right? And millions and millions of dollars on the line. I understand there's Hollywood accounting and there's some weird fluff in that system, but still, the numbers are terrible. Think, who wants to go to the DMV, right? Or Walmart, maybe. I don't know. Actually, Walmart's okay. I like Walmart, but I mean, let's suppose a high end store, Gucci or Hermes. Like when I shop at those stores occasionally, like for my wife, often the experiences are pretty bland, pretty awful, and I'm paying a big premium to be there. So I think it's for lack of measurement, right? So in the Experience Economy book by Pine and Gilmore, one of my favorite books, they talk about time as a metric of impact. And I think there's something to be said for that. If I spend more time in your experience, except for the DMV, I'm probably exploring, and sorry, I'm probably enjoying it more. But at the same time, I need the platform we develop. I have second by second data. Ask what parts of this are fabulous, what parts of it are not so good and need um, improvement. So, in like many things in life, is the 80-20 rule. Like 20% of the employees sell 80% of the product in stores, on and on and on. So, what are those 20% doing? I want to know that and then generalize it, right? How do I do this thing better? And so, if we're competing for that big fat profit margin for high value added for great experiences, then in fact, we need to measure what really matters, which is this deep in the brainstem emotional response that people cannot relate very accurately.
Yeah, that is so important, going back to that experience, because my background, as you know, is healthcare for many decades, and everybody is trying to figure out the patient experience, right? Well, that also translate into other businesses as well. So, how do you create those unique experiences that keep those people coming back and back? Oftentimes in an emergency room, that's the first point of contact for a patient, and they could have stellar care or a great experience throughout their whole hospital stay, but they will remember that first point of contact. And if it was terrible, that's all that they remember, right?
Mhm.
So it's really important to measure the right thing, like you said, so that you can optimize that. And I love what you said about the 80-20 rule, because that 20% of the people that are getting it right, we want to model and emulate that, in our industry. And I think that's why healthcare oftentimes looks at airline industry, from a safety perspective, because they get it right. How many planes do you hear about falling out of the sky every day versus how many sentinel events that you hear, in an operating room or ER or hospital, right? So, I think having those learnings and those studies are key, but it takes work, right?
It doesn't actually. So I think that's the beautiful thing about starting a company is that there's no more studies, there's no more experiments. This is a commercial product. Anyone can use it, made for normal humans, no special training needed, everything's simple. The platform tells you if it's good or bad and how to make it better. And so I think that's the real innovation in the world is that all the stuff that starts in labs eventually gets down to you know everyone can kind of use it at a very reasonable cost. I remember when I think in the late 80s, early 90s, when my mother, who was the least technical person in the world, got email. Like email used to be a special, special thing for the kids out there, right? So, like no one had email in till really the late 80s. Maybe computer scientists did and mathematicians. But anyway, like once my mom got it, it's like, ah, man, this is not cool anymore. Like everyone's got the email. So, I think it's the same thing with all these technologies, right? They start in the lab, we refine them, and in fact, I think the great thing about having a software platform, a neuroscience software platform, is that people find uses for it that you wouldn't have thought of. So I don't have to think of every interesting application. People are like every day. So the most interesting stuff I think we're doing now is in digital health,
Mm,
like to actually quantify the value the brain assigns to social experiences, which, as you know, Michelle, are actually more important at extending health span than is quitting smoking, having rich social life. That's great. So how do we do that? What does a rich social life mean? Well, that's a valuation mechanism in the brain, in my world. And so, in some recently published research at a scientific journal, we showed that in an elderly population in a retirement home, we can actually predict people's troughs in mood and energy with 98% accuracy 2 days before it happens. Like
mm.
that's a real tool to help people stay emotionally fit. So we're now having people in high stress jobs use these, like first responders and content moderators, like the people who really need measurement because we don't always know. We think, I'm an adult. I can sit here for 8 hours and do some a really hard job and function perfectly. Maybe not, right?
Right, right. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about taking those learnings and how do we increase value to our customers, our clients, our patients, whatever that bucket that our business is in. How do we do that?
Yeah, the first is really kind of a 5-step program. First is I call setting the stage, right? So I want to create a space for that person to be comfortable and to allow them to have the neural bandwidth to actually have a great experience. So that's not rushing them, making sure they're comfortable. Do you need a restroom? Do you need a snack? Do you need a drink? So oftentimes we think, I want to be really efficient, but efficiency is not always efficiency takes bandwidth. I'm speeding you through something. Maybe you want to get done as fast as possible, but I'm not allowing the space to open up to actually have that emotional connection to provide that social experience that adds value to the product or service that you're in my, you know, store or online to get. So first is creating that space. We call it psychological safety. It's measurable, again, from our platform physiologically. The second is really immerse you in the experience, create a real emotional experience. The best way to do that is to tell a story, a human scale story with authentic emotions, a story that relates to the product or service that you're trying to experience. So with patients, this works great. It's the sort of people like you. Great, Mrs. Smith. Thank you for that description of your symptoms. I had a patient just like you last week, and let me tell you what we did for her. Oh, okay. So now I have, if I didn't have credibility as a physician already, now I have credibility. I can talk about that. You feel comfortable that you're not some weird outlier. You never want to be medically interesting, right? That's a bad thing. Guess we know what to do. Here's a treatment protocol. And then I think from the outside the hospital setting, the next step is to really have that experience be relevant to you. So this is customization at scale. So as you know, Michelle, because you stay at the Four Seasons all the time, when you come in, they greet you. They know who you are. They greet you by name.
Mhm.
So I, every couple of months, visit my 90-year-old father, stay at the same hotel. Every time I come in, they're like, thanks for coming to the hotel. We have a pool. We have the gym. I'm like, I'm your best customer. Every 3 months, I am here. And I told them, like, you need a CRM or something. Like, how come you don't know me? They have a list of people checking in. You should have a gold star. My name should be circled. Oh my God, it's that Zach dude. He's here again. And you should greet me by name. So that's what happens to me when I stay rarely, but I stay at the Four Seasons to say, welcome, Dr. Zach. Your room's ready for you. Oh, you don't need to go to the front desk. Here's the key. I've got it for you. Oh, that's great. Right. So that kind of make it really relevant, customize at scale. Sorry, two more steps. The next one is identify your super fans, right? So, um, we think a lot about averages, but one of the sort of dirty secrets of neuroscience is that the averages are not very meaningful. So again, we want to try to address the people having a bad experience and address that right away. But also think of your super fans. They love this experience so much. They will work to help you. Put them to work. They want to do something, right? Engage them, co-create with them. They are leverage points. And then the last step is ask people to do something at the end. Provide a Yelp review. You take a survey. Recommend your product or service to a friend. If you've had a great experience for that customer, they will help you too. So it's really engaging people before, during, and after that customer experience.
Yeah, that's so critical because I just think in business in general, um, people just want to get to the end, right? And they forget all those steps in building relationships, and really learning what that person's problem is and how can you solve that person's problem. They just want to get to the sale, right? If we're talking about sales or get the product or the service or, you know, build their numbers, everything's about numbers. But I like what you said because it's kind of like honey, right? When you find those customers and you create those unique experiences that are unique to them and their situation, it spreads like honey versus pushing things on people. Because I know I personally don't like to be sold. I don't know anybody that doesn't. I was just having a conversation earlier with my daughter about that. You know, people don't like to be sold and they want to know that they're the only person in the room and that if they have a problem, you have the solution to the problem and you're going to partner with them, you know, along the way to make sure that their problem's getting solved. So I think setting all those steps up makes a lot of difference and it applies to just about any industry that you're in, whether you're an employer or you're the business owner or you're a CEO of a large company, right?
And even it applies to employees. So I think the EX to CX is very important. That when that employee experience is great, then you're going to put more discretionary effort if you're customer facing. It's just kind of human nature. So we're also running out of humans. If you've ever looked at the data on the aging workforce and the lack of babies, it's happening everywhere except Africa. And by 2030, the labor force will start aging in Africa. So we need to take care of these people who are with us, both from a kind of cognitive perspective, but also from an emotional perspective. Make sure that they can focus their energy and passion and understand how important that is to create these great workplaces. And from the CX side, it's really increasing customer lifetime value. So
Mm.
I'm much less interested in, although I'm happy to get the sale now, I really want to build that super fan that would just keep coming back and coming back. So that story I told you about the Four Seasons happened to me 15 years ago, where the doorman knew my name and had my key ready, and it was in Sydney, Australia. And like since then, I'm like, where do you want to stay? We're flying you to give a talk. Well, if I have a choice, I'll say the Four Seasons, right? So I know it's going to be A plus perfect, right? And it always has been. So I think that level of fandom, even though I'm a cheap guy and I don't want to pay for that myself, although I did take my wife there on our anniversary, so
That's so
I
nice.
have paid. But yeah, I mean, given a choice, I mean, I know it's always going to be great. I know they're going to provide a great experience to me. I'm a hardcore fan, and that's amazing. Zappos is a great example of that, online shoe and clothing seller. I think this data is in my new book, but I think 80% roughly of their sales are repeat business. So the customer lifetime value is really high because they treat people like the kings and queens they should be treated like, right? Not like, again, I like Walmart. I like the democracy of Walmart. Everything's cheap. Wear your sweats. Get what you want. Right? It's really nice and simple. And the people are nice. There's no problem with that. But that's a different product, right? That's high volume, low margin. But I think increasingly, as our incomes are high enough, really around the world, looking for that experience, I'm willing to pay for that experience. So Zappos has cost a little more. I can probably get a cheaper product if I really shopped online somewhere. The Container Store, another great
Mhm.
store. Their employee experience is extraordinary. So average turnover in U.S. retail is about 66% per year. So two-thirds of the people leave within a year or any year. And in the Container Store, it's less than 10% turnover. They
Oh,
get so
yeah.
much training. They're treated extraordinarily well. They're paid a premium. And guess what? They get great customer service. So you're paying a premium. I mean, the products are really nice there for sure, nicer than Walmart by far. But also, you're paying for that amazing service where they'll talk to you, focus on the best solution to your problem, whether it's a $5 hook or a $500 new closet system.
Yeah, that's key, and I think as a business owner, making sure that your employees are happy and they have the training that they need and genuinely happy, not because they're told to be happy, and I think those are great examples. Starbucks is another one, the Ritz-Carlton is another one.
Mhm.
I mean, there's just I think, was it 1-800 junk for junk or something? I forgot the junk company.
Mhm.
They're another great example. And I know for me, I went and had an oil change at Grease Monkey, and I got in my car, and they had a white carnation on the dashboard, and I
Great.
thought I was like, I, an oil change, and I got a flower, and I go back. Now they're a
Yeah.
little bit on the high end, but I thought they treat me really well. They get me in and out. They know my name, like you said, when I come in, and they left me a flower. I thought that was just
And what
fabulous.
it costs them, 50 cents or something, but it's that attention to detail that says, I want to make this a great experience for you. So you have something to talk about, as opposed to I went to a generic oil change and something, it was fine. That little extra, that's what we're looking for. And your name is so important. And introduce yourself if you're on the employee side. Hi, I'm Paul. I'm going to help you shop for shoes today, or I can answer any questions you have, or, those open ended questions. Let's have a conversation.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that is just so important.
Mhm.
So, Paul, thanks so much. I'm going to open it up for questions, but while I do that, why don't you tell us where people can buy your book, where they can see your talks? Because I know you've done a lot of TED Talks all over the world. If they want to learn more about your platform and how to leverage it in their business, I do have your paulzak.com, but maybe there's another way that people can connect with you.
Perfect. Yeah, on the crawl, it's pauljzak.com. There's another Paul Zak who's not related to me, but we know each other, of course. You can find out about immersion at getimmersion.com, immersion with an I. The book's available at Amazon, anywhere online. And happy to take some questions. I think, there's so much that we haven't done to make the world a better place. So, one of the interesting motifs of the book from a business perspective is if you can create these peak immersion experiences for customers, not only do you increase customer lifetime value, but you're actually training the brain to be fully present and emotionally engaged in life in general. So, the last chapter of the book, it's part of the subtitle. It's called Happiness. It's really about how businesses have a key role at improving satisfaction with life, right? Where I learn how to be fully emotionally engaged when I have that great experience at the Four Seasons or at Grease Monkey, right? So I'm able to open up. I'm not holding in. And there's very interesting evidence from my lab and others that, in fact, people have these great experiences are just more interesting to be around, have richer social relationships, and live longer and healthier. So I think there's a real sacred duty from a business perspective to not only sustain profits, maintain your employment, and all those good things that businesses do for society, but actually create a better world by making people happier.
Yeah, that is so important because we live in a very high stress society. We have the elections going on right now. Everybody I've talked to today is like, these elections. So I think anything that we can do to make the world just a better place than when we left it is so valuable, whether that be, an interpersonal connection or on a business connection, a nonprofit connection, whatever it is, anything that we could do that adds value back to the world as a whole is so important.
Mhm.
So about your software, I have a question. So how does that work? If somebody wanted to engage your platform, how do they gain access to data or their customer data? Talk to us a little bit how that
Mhm.
process works.
Right. So subscription software, sits in the cloud. The innovation that the company is based on is that we can pull data from smartwatches or fitness sensors that people already use. They download the Immersion app, and then you, as a researcher or as a person who wants to improve an experience, can actually see that data live. So, real-time neuroscience is really hard, and it took us many years and lots of taxpayer support, frankly, to capture these signals I've called immersion. That is the value that we get from experiences with social content. And then once you have that data, then you can ask what's good and bad. As I said, we have more than 50,000 brains on there now. So we have really good norms on what's good and bad. And you can see the data second by second. And the platform will overlay, for example, a video of that experience with the data
Mm.
for as many people as you want. So you don't need to have a PhD in data analytics to understand good and bad, right? It's normed to run 0 to 100 and like, oh, here's the peak moments of that experience and here are not. So I'll give you a concrete example. Pre-COVID, a couple of the movie studios used our technology to improve movie trailers, those 3-minute trailers you see in the theater, because from the movie distributor's perspective, they get most of their income the first 2 weeks, and then they get less income when movies last longer than that. So they need to get butts in chairs. So they would measure. So companies just make movie trailers. So they measure these roughs of really movie trailers. They would then measure immersion, take the top two, start to edit those, get them down to one, test those in the target demographic before they release them. So they're not just in the old days we just guess and verify like, hey, this seems cool. What do you think, Bob? Is this gonna? Oh yeah, it's gonna be great, right? So again, that's an experience that you can edit and improve. The same thing with employee experience. measuring employees who face chronic stress to ensure that they're emotionally fit, that they can do their jobs well. I mean, I'm just passionate about that. I just want people to be healthy and happy. So again, if you're going to get burnt out and quit or take sick days, that's not good for the organization. It's not good for the employees. So again, we need a measurement tool. So anyway, lots of interesting applications.
Yeah. So what is the most unique application that you have used in industry?
That's a good question, and people do all kinds of weird stuff. I think, the K to 12 education is really interesting. I don't know if how old your kids are, but like Zoom school and lockdown was just a mess, total mess, mostly a waste of time. So I think we have some interesting companies that advise schools and school districts on actually measuring kids in school. So there's a strong correlation between immersion in an experience and information recall weeks later. So we can measure that student or that student's parent will know immediately after class how effectively they absorb the material. They'll do better on tests and allows that this kind of iterative improvement. So again, there's no, 0 to 100 immediately. It's more like, okay, here's what we've got. Let's start to tweak this. Okay, now we're moving up the immersion curve. So again, a concrete example of our longest client has been Accenture. Accenture has almost 700,000 employees worldwide and spends about $1 billion a year training those employees with new skills. And prior to using immersion, their metric of success was the post-training survey that we've all taken. How was the keynote? Did you like Michelle? How was the hotel? I don't care about any of that. I want to know, did this information shake up your brain so much that information stuck in there? And when you go back to work on Monday, you can create more value. You have more skills. And so they've really optimized a lot of the training they've done, breaking it down into 20-minute modules, because after 20 minutes, you just can't stay immersed. It's too metabolically costly. So that's very practical.
Yeah, no, that is. So I have another question. Um, is there one industry that you would like to deploy the platform into that you haven't?
That's a good question. The thing I am so excited about doing, but we haven't been able to break through, is live attractions. So we're in talks with Disney prior to the COVID lockdowns. Any Disney people, please email me. But go to Imagineering. I mean, they build these VR now before they make attractions, VR experiences to try to test, what works and what doesn't. But by having and they build scale mock-ups as well, but you can walk through those and to actually measure what your brain values as opposed to what people like. Liking is just the wrong question. Liking compared to what? Liking compared to my kids? I should forget my kids. Liking compared to my dog? My dog's perfect. My dog never talks back to me, always gives me affection, right? So
Yeah.
I think the liking question is the wrong question. The question is, does it shake up your brain? Does it turn you on so much that you just got to do this again? You love it so much. So we actually took our platform to wearables to Disneyland some years ago with my team, and across I think about a dozen attractions that we went on, they averaged in the 98th percentile for immersion. Like Disney really does a great job. So yeah, I mean, I think cruise ships are slowly coming back, right, in the post-COVID world. Let's make that fabulous, and I think it's easy to do. You just add our API to your existing, app on people's phones or watches, and you're good to go. So I think that's what would be really cool. We do a lot of live events like organizational transformation. Almost all of the big professional services companies use our technology for various uses. But I don't know, it'd just be super cool, right? To be involved in creating a new park or I don't know, a better entertainment experience would be awesome.
Yeah, and even from an architectural design, I mean, that would be amazing to use the technology towards that
Yeah.
for building design. I look at it from flow because I've designed buildings, using lean principles, but, pulling in that other layer of the experience and colors and layout and patterns and plants or just getting that feedback of what your end user or your customer or employees would like to be working in. I think that would be
Yeah.
an interesting case study.
Yeah, and everything is kind of moving into XR now. So I think, so much of what we're going to be doing will be in the VR kind of space. And so, the early data that I report in the book is XR is not always a win compared to online or in person. In person is actually really, really good. I mean, we're social creatures. We like to be around the other humans. Um, these kind of VR spaces, not to mention any companies, but sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. And so I think again, we can guess and hope that we're right, or we can just measure and start to, change this and that and see what happens. So I think the whole VR revolution and AR revolution is going to be really, really interesting, and to efficiently create these spaces where people want to have meetings, meet with clients, learn new things. That's a measurement problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, great stuff. Paul, thanks so much. That's what we had for questions for you. They were unique. Hopefully they weren't too tough. Everybody, please buy Paul's book, Trust Factor. Highly recommend that. Immersion. I will be getting that so I can read it. I think last time you and I were speaking, it wasn't out yet. I think it came out in July or August, right?
End of September,
Into
just about a
September.
month ago. Yeah.
Yeah, so good stuff. Paul, thanks again so much. Hope to have you on again and learn more about what you're doing. And yeah, so thanks.
Thank you so much, Michelle.
You bet. All right, everybody, we'll see you next week. Bye.